Hello, beautiful vegans. Welcome to Empowered Vegans, the show that inspires and empowers. I'm Mariquita Solis, or Mariquita Solis if you can't roll your R like me. I am a vegan empowerment coach, and my mission is to inspire everyone to really stand in their power and to love themselves so they can be better advocates for themselves and for Mother Earth. So if you're watching, please let us know where you're joining from and give StreamYard permission to use your name on the should be up there in the top in the description. And let us know if you have any questions. I'm so excited to welcome my friend Bala Yancey here today. I met him at Just Love Forest in Rome, Georgia. So I'm going to let Bala tell you all about that. So welcome, Bala.
Hey, thank you.
So again, let us know who's watching. And Bala is going to share his amazing transformational story from his world of technology to now being the spiritual steward of Just Love Forest, a 700-acre property in Rome, Georgia. And I don't even like that word property, forest. I'm sorry, Just Love Forest, for calling you property. Well, I don't want to hurt her feelings. So my apologies. All right. So, Bala, tell us about your youth. What were you like? Were you really into the forest, or what were you like as a little boy?
I was. You were asking me before we started this where I grew up, and I grew up actually outside of Atlanta. And at that time, very different now, but at that time it was still pretty forested. The suburbs were, like the wild frontier around the Norcross area. So there were a lot of trees and forests. And I did have a lot of friends who, we would go out for hours and hours and hours and endless scenarios of, connecting with nature and using our imagination and creativity. So I definitely was one of those kids. And I did spend a lot of time by myself playing with bugs and things as well. So, but yeah, as a kid, I was very playful, good-hearted, like pretty much like now, but younger.
Were you an animal lover when you were a child?
I was an animal lover when I was a child. I mean, I had cats, and we did have a dog, and I did love them, but I don't know if I would have overtly more so identified as an animal lover compared to a lover of other things. So yeah, I definitely love animals. Yeah, for sure. We had two cats that I primarily identified with as, my pets.
Well, did you know about when you were a little boy, did you have any vegetarian friends or vegan friends, or did you even know what that was?
No, not at all. I mean, if you define little boy as under the age of 15, maybe something like that. My mom was doing yoga. So I was born in 1979, just to give some context. And so through the 80s and early 90s, my mom was doing yoga, which I didn't really know what it was. But I think I kind of looked into it a little bit because, I'd be like, what are these strange postures and things she's doing? It was different than anything I saw anyone else doing or that I knew of. Again, you have to imagine this was, the 80s in America. But I wouldn't say, so my mom, I would say was kind of connected spiritually, very deeply. But in terms of our friend set from our family or for me personally, I don't even remember. Actually, the only thing I can tell you I do remember, which is kind of funny, when I was about 10 or 12, my dad took me on a trip to California to see my godfather for a ski trip. And, California, again, let's assume this is 1990 or something. California has always been, in terms of diet stuff, ahead of the curve compared to where we are. And I remember that he was really excited to take us to this healthy vegetarian restaurant. I don't know, maybe I could have told you what a vegetarian was, but that would be about it, And I went, and I remember it was terrible. I remember as a kid, I was like, this is the worst tasting, most bland. I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. So that was my limited experience as an adolescent, I think, with anything vegetarian or vegan.
That's funny. I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about it at all. I mean, vegetarian or vegan. I think the first time I heard the word was when a friend of mine in college said he was vegetarian. And I did know what it was, but I didn't really know an actual vegetarian. And I thought, what are you thinking? You're going to die.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing really back then, right? There was this kind of like mythology of, you know, if you don't eat animals, it's just a matter of time. We last a day, a week, a month, forget 6 months.
Right. Well, so then you went on, and what happened? Then you went to college and you studied. What did you study?
I went to Georgia State and I did political science and sociology. I actually spent a year. I started actually at University of the South, which is this small conservative Gothic Episcopal-based university. I was raised Episcopalian. My mom's a deacon, ordained deacon in the Episcopal Church. So that kind of is like that part of my background. Anyway, I went there for one semester. I came out in my senior year in high school. It just wasn't a good match there. So I actually left and I taught school in Honduras for a year. I took off a year. And then when I came back, I then enrolled in Georgia State University, lived in Atlanta, and was doing political science and sociology, primarily because the work I had done down there, I was actually working in some private Episcopal schools, teaching 2nd and 6th grade English and math. But most of my time I spent outside the private school and working with like kids in the dump, just trying to, outside of a program, just trying to build a house and trying to get them medicine and trying to get them food. And that was really transformative for me. And so I wanted to continue that type of work. And so that was, I was thinking kind of general Peace Corps track type stuff in general. And that's why it was actually political science with a concentration in international affairs and sociology. And relevant to your last question, when I came back and I had started college and I was in Atlanta, I can't tell you why. I'm honestly thinking, I don't know why. I know later, but when I was 21, I decided to be vegan for a month. So this is probably 99 or 2000. And it was terrible also. I didn't have, there were no groups, there was no, I just think I got on some really crazy health kick that I just decided. I honestly don't know what I read or what I saw or what I heard. I can't tell you, but I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's going to be super healthy. And yeah, it was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing at all. I didn't have access to any kind of easy meals. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any, like people to look up to on a personal level that were doing that. And so I was kind of just randomly eating like rice and beans and nuts and I had a headache almost every day. And after a month, I was like, I'll never do this again. That was nonsense. So that was my little rendezvous with that. I'm just telling you now because it'll come back as we talk later.
Yeah. Well, keep going in the story.
Okay. So political science and sociology, I think I'm going to do Peace Corps. And so again, this is, around 2000. So Atlanta at the time, technology was booming. The internet was really just being born in a real way. And so I was working throughout college to help pay for college and things. And so oftentimes I was doing internships or technology based, just because a lot of them were looking for research people, help them organize things, just looking for college students that were halfway intelligent just to help them organize things. And so I kept getting these positions with the technology companies that were all very interesting. I mean, there was a billion startups at that time, 99.9% of them all failed. But during that first period of time, it was like a startup.com for everything you could possibly imagine. So I was working with lots of those that had gotten a lot of crazy funding. And so I was building up this experience kind of like with .com internet stuff, even though that wasn't my aspiring track. And so then basically when I was going to, the next step after that, if I was going to do that kind of international relief work, was to go to law school. I was on a law school track. It was political science and sociology. And I had a friend who I needed to basically work for about a year in between the time I would leave college and start law school. And my friend said, oh, I've got a couple of close friends who are just starting a very small digital marketing agency. Digital marketing was like a very new concept then, because everything on the web was so atypical and non-standard, and everyone's just trying to figure out how you work it. Basically, this is like the days of the Yahoo directory. This is before Google existed, just to date myself a little bit. And so he said, yeah, why don't you, they need some help. Would you want to come work with them? So I met with them, really great guys who just graduated from Emory University, Dave Williams and Brian Kachowski. And I was basically like a glorified intern, in the sense that it was just like help out with everything. Every day was kind of different, just working with those two founders. And long story short, I'd always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always was an entrepreneur, like wanting to start my own thing. And so I worked with them for a couple of years. And then because everything with specifically search engine marketing was so new, and the jobs were, they were just so hot at that time, because I had experience working with some big brands, and I had some experience with helping them with sales. At the time when I started with them, I think it was like a $20,000 a year job, something, like very entry level, right out of college. We'll give you some money, come hang out with us, help us out. I didn't care because, it was going to be a year till I was going to do other things. And then I got a call from a recruiter in New York. And they said, oh, you see that you're helping out with sales here, you work with some brands. They're like, we'd like you to interview for a $125,000 sales position in New York. And I was like, what? I was like, I don't think I'm qualified, but, okay. Like, I'll at least have this call. Long story short, they ended up offering this job in New York. And so anyway, I go up there and I basically fall in love with digital marketing, not just for that one opportunity. Like, I love the time. We take it for granted now, but just like it's like what's happening now with AI is what was happening then with search. Like, it was such a foreign concept that you wouldn't see a billboard on the side of the road as you drove by, or you'd get a newsletter with an ad that like all this content would be personalized to you. Like that at the time, we take it for granted now, but that was like mind blowing. That changed everything for companies and people. So like that whole transition was actually really exciting at that time because it was brand new and we were getting to talk about it and everyone's trying to figure out how to do it. So long story short, I got involved early with that company and then worked for another company in New York. They ended up hiring me back, much longer story, like about a year later for a larger salary. So I went, and so I only say that because it was just ridiculous because I was basically like a kid with hardly any experience. And just because of the time and what they were doing, they got in this little silly war with each other and they kept, like giving a little carrot here and a little carrot there. And so I ended up working with the CEO. So that company that I was with, 360, I sold to a bigger company. And they were based in New York, which I was already there because that other company had hired me. And then so the CEO of the new company wanted me to work for them. And I didn't want to work for them because I wanted to go do my own thing. So I basically said in the interview, I'm like, well, I don't want to work for you. I'm doing my own thing. My plan is I'm going to start my own company, yada, yada. But Brian asked me to come meet with you. I'm happy to meet with you. I'm happy to help you. And then he was like, okay, well, I'm going to try to make you an offer you can't refuse. I'm like, okay. And so basically what I told him was I would work for him if he allowed me to work on my own company half-time. And I worked for him half-time. And I could only report indirectly to him because I was like, he's not going to say yes to this. And I don't want this job anyway. So I'm just going to make up my best possible case scenario and just leave knowing he's not going to say yes. And he was like, okay, let's do it. So basically I'm in New York and then I'm working half the week for him. And I'm working half the week starting my own thing. Which was a company called Meeple is what I was starting. I was trying to take like a LinkedIn type environment and monetize it so that people could sort of like sell their time in different ways. So to people they didn't know, they were just getting to know. I raised some money. It was just, I got it past concept stage, but it didn't turn into anything big. And so anyway, long story short, for about 10 years unexpectedly, then I was actually working doing crazy things that at every juncture I was like, how did I get here? What's happening?
Wow, the universe loved you.
Yeah, it was a very interesting ride for sure. Very exciting. But it wasn't purpose driven. and it wasn't aligned with my heart. It was a young phase. It was like money driven, adrenaline, excitement. But if you'd asked me then in my early to mid 20s, like, well, is this aligned with your purpose? I'd be like, well, purpose? Like, I would have been like, I don't know exactly what you mean. Like, I've got a great life. I'm making great money. What do you mean by purpose? I don't know if I would literally say that, but I think metaphorically, I think I would have not understood things that I experience and understand now at all. So, but yeah, that was kind of that phase was after college. Was on the law school track for that reason from the time in Honduras, and then fell into digital marketing at really the perfect time. And there was a series of events that put me in very unusual situations that allowed me to have a very interesting career in that space for about a decade.
Well, goodness. So now let's hear about the transformation.
The exciting part. No. So what happened after that was, so that company that started in Atlanta, it was sold to the company in New York. That company in New York then offered stock to the employees then, and then they sold that company again. And so I had some stock in that company the second time. And when it sold, I actually moved to London for almost 6 years, because that company, 360i, based in New York, was expanding, and they didn't have anything in Europe. And they were like, I kept saying, oh, I'm leaving. And they were like, do you want to move to Europe and start everything for us? And I was like, yes. So I did that. And so basically I did that for about 3 or 4 years for them. And then I got paid from the company having sold again. And it didn't make me a bajillionaire, but it gave me enough money to start my own company finally, like in a real way. And so in 2012, I started, and this is relevant to the transformation I'm talking about. So in 2012, I started a company called Cloud Tags. And again, no alignment with purpose, no consideration of purpose. It was so valuable for later, the contrast to how I'm living, what I'm doing, but couldn't have been further away from like purpose driven. It was just like, okay, I'm looking at like, how can I make some money so I can be happy and free? It's like all the nonsense, right? So basically I do that company for about 6 years, and we raised $6 million. Like, it was a real company. We had a little team in India and Europe and the US. And I couldn't have been more scattered and decimated and tired. And as the company went along further and we got some venture capitalists involved, it's a story you always hear. At some point, all I was doing was like, I was just a money raiser. Like, I wasn't doing anything fun. I wasn't getting to spend any time with employees, all the things that I would have enjoyed. I was just basically the guy to go raise money. And I hated that. At some point it was horrible. And we were always just raising enough money to keep things going. It was never enough to be like, okay, now we have 2 years of runway and we can actually like sit down and take a breath and think. It was always like, oh, okay, now we got 6 months left. And then by the time you have 6 months left and 2 months in it, you've got 4 months to figure out where the next funding. So it's just this constant crazy schedule. And because I have people in India and Europe and the US, unfortunately, if I woke up at any hour of the night, I could pick up my phone at any time and there would be somebody awake who wanted something, who needed something, who wanted to talk. And so I just was not treating myself well at all. I didn't have any, I went to the gym, I ran, but like what I would consider self-care now, meditation, breath work, diet, just giving yourself creative time to just be away, none of that, and I didn't have, and when you're in those environments, all your peers, everyone's pushing you to just do it more, do it harder, do it, all those things. Like, we've heard the story a million different flavors, a million different times. So, so basically I was running myself thin, and I could see at some point the company wasn't going to be a success. Like, it wasn't going to be a great exit. And I was just sort of stuck, I felt really stuck on a lot of levels. And then this is October of 2017. My body just kind of seized up on me. And then what I would say what that meant for me was just in a given day, my back and my nervous system just completely just like shut everything down. And what that led to is me kind of being incapacitated for a couple of weeks where I couldn't really walk. And, people needed to come help me at home, like get out of bed and get food and get water, like completely pathetic. And so what I would tell you is when that happened, there was no big experience or anything in that moment, but there was just this realization within myself of like, I can't live this way anymore. I cannot live this way anymore. I don't know what that means. I have no idea what that looks like, but I know if I keep doing this, like I can't see any vision of me staying here in this earth in this way for a number of decades I probably have left, And so there was just kind of this acknowledgement of like, okay, you're not going to keep treating yourself this way. Again, you don't know what you would do different. There was no big commitment. It was just, there was like a real realization without anyone having to tell me like, this isn't going to last. This isn't going to work. That's in October. And I'm still kind of like fiddle-faddling around with this company and trying to figure out how do I get out of this thing. And so December, so now just a couple months after that, it's the week before Christmas, and that's when I'm at my parents' lake house at Lake Lanier. And when I woke up that morning, it was just a normal morning, like, any other morning. I can't recall anything at all different about it. But I had spaciousness. I was there helping my parents get ready for Christmas, just decorating and things. And there wasn't much going on that day. The weather was cold. No one was outside. So there was spaciousness. And I had done a very small amount of meditation, maybe 10 years before when I was in New York. When I say very small, I mean, maybe I went to 3 meditation classes. And I was like, this isn't really for me. Like, I love the idea of meditating. I hear people talk about it, but this is not for me. And I didn't think about it ever again. I wasn't seeking to be a meditator, And so sorry, were you going to say something?
Laughing.
Yeah. So basically, not sure. Basically, I had what I would only be able to explain as like a deep inner voice within me. It was just, go sit down and meditate now. It wasn't like the clouds parted and, there was some being that came down. It was within me, but it was a different type of communication than I could ever recall. And it was just very like, there was a strong immediacy to it, like, go sit down and meditate now. And it seemed a little strange, but again, I had the spaciousness. So I was like, okay, well, like, why not? It's a rainy Saturday. I'm here at my parents' house. And so they had a room, or they have a room still, where the closet is just off the bedroom and there's no windows in it. And it was a simple experience of me opening that closet door and going and sitting down, just crossing my legs, closing my eyes. And the instant that I closed my eyes, the best way I can describe it was there was this massive instantaneous expansion of energy. And so, it's like, normally you sit down and you close your eyes. If I ask people, like, what is that experience like? They would say everything else is kind of the same, but it's like pulling down kind of a dark set of curtains. But once the curtain's down, like, kind of, this is kind of the same. It's like I open the curtains. It's still kind of the same. It's just the curtains are up or down. This was, that whole container was just gone. And it was an intensive experience. And so the way I describe it is like my whole life, I haven't had a name and a body up to that point. And that is like when everything within those curtains, when you pull them down, tied with a body and a name, like that was a total way that I could identify with my existence. And in that moment, suddenly with this expansive energy, I couldn't articulate what or who or why or any of that, but I just knew that the expansiveness of that energy field, which seemed infinite, it just kept going and going and going. I knew that I was in relation to it. It wasn't happening to me. It wasn't happening apart from me. I don't know that in that moment I would have articulated as I knew I was that, but I knew that it wasn't nefarious. I knew that it wasn't. So, but what happened was, because it was very visceral, very intensive, my immediate reaction, like probably like most people, was like, and I opened my eyes, like when it first happened. And when I opened my eyes, I was just back to this normal baseline. You know, I was kind of like doing this, like, did I have a stroke? I don't know, you know. And then when I closed my eyes, I went right back into that just ever expanding energy field. And so I sat there for just under an hour, and I still knew who I was. I knew who I was. I knew my phone number. I knew my social security number. I knew all of my parts of my egoic identity were intact. And there was this opening with this energy that I was very curious about. When I knew I wasn't hurting, there was nothing that seemed physically wrong with me. Eventually, I was able to relax a little bit as I was sitting there, and I was just deeply curious, like, what is happening? What is this experience? If you had asked me then to define a spiritual awakening or talk about a spiritual awakening, I couldn't have really told you what a spiritual awakening was. I never really heard a book about a spiritual awakening. I didn't know a person who had had a spiritual awakening. So I have this experience, and this energy field is just that I have this some relationship with. Again, at that time, I couldn't have really articulated it well, but again, it didn't feel nefarious. It felt that I was that, even though I completely didn't understand any of it logically at that time. And so in sitting there for about an hour, I was doing this thing where it's like, what's going to happen if I sit here another 10 minutes, another 10 minutes? Because I just don't know what this is or where it's leading. There's still my egoic part who eventually was like, hey, you've been sitting in this closet for an hour and like, nobody knows you're in here. And also like you're at your family's house, you're supposed to be helping. That part was still fully intact. And so like, I knew I'd been there a long time. And so I was like, okay. I was like, open my eyes and I'm like back to baseline. I'm like, okay. I'm like, what do you do? Like what, you know? And so the next thing to do was to walk downstairs where I knew my mom would be and see what would happen. I didn't know what had happened. I didn't know I was okay or not okay, whatever that meant. I didn't know when someone said, hey, how's it going? I don't know what'll happen next. I don't know anymore. I'm not sure, because this experience was very visceral and very big. And so I go downstairs. I know it's about lunchtime, and the normal cadence would be my mom standing in the kitchen. And sure enough, I walk downstairs. She's standing in the kitchen, you know, like, hey, honey, how's it going? I'm like, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, well, so words came out. She received them. Okay, that's a good first step. And then she said, what would you like to have for lunch today? And almost every meal, I would have some kind of meat, especially for lunch, you know, whether it was like a turkey sandwich or chicken salad or something. To not eat meat with lunch would have been different for me. And so what I can tell you is, in that moment, my experience was I was observing words coming through me that I was not necessarily directing from my egoic rational mind. And the words that came out were, I don't think I feel like eating meat today. I'm just going to have a salad. And I'm kind of witnessing this almost separate outside of myself. And I'm like, you're what, a what? Okay. And so that was the start of a series of events where I realized that the way I explain it is, all of my default preferences, like our identity is pretty much made up of a series of preferences that we build up over time, that we become identified with. That becomes our story. That becomes our identity, right? That's what creates a separateness between me and you, is only a set of preferences and the stories that we create. So those set of preferences had just all been wiped clean. Again, my identity was still intact. So I could tell you historically the story of my life up to that point. And I knew all of the components of my identity up to that point. What was different was everything from that point forward was somatically driven through the sensibility of my body and my heart. And it wasn't being driven by my frontal lobe and my reactions and just my like chemical biology of like, this is what I want. I'm going to get this. I'm going to. And so I literally had to relearn all of the parts of the story that make up me, which are tied to your preferences. And so what I can tell you, which is very unusual, is that having like if you'd asked me before that moment, did I want to be a vegetarian? Let's not even talk about veganism at first. Let's just talk about vegetarianism, because it would have at that time sounded easier to me. I would have told you that I'm not against it. I don't refute that there's probably some great health advantages to it. And if there was a group of people I was friends with that wanted to do a diet challenge or something, I would be open to it to see. But there was a lot going on in my life, and if you ask me where does that fall on my list of priorities, I would be like, oh, it's hundreds of rows down on my spreadsheet of things that I would be aspiring to do, you know. And so ever since that moment, I never ate or touched another piece of meat. And so I was vegetarian, and the thing was that I never felt any difficulty with it at all whatsoever. I never missed anything. I never missed a cheeseburger. The things that were hard for me in the first, so I was vegetarian for about 1.5 years before I became vegan. And in that first 1.5 years, the things that were hardest for me didn't have to do with cravings of previous palate and taste profiles. It was rituals and traditions. It was like 4th of July feeling left out. And it was like Christmas. Now, I'll talk about later, that's changed over time. But like the first year, I was like, oh, okay, I feel really left out from the rituals that I've done my whole life and the way that we've done them together as a group of friends or a family. But yeah, in reference to this, I was vegetarian for about 1.5 years, and my brother, so like after this happened with me, and I only ended up talking to my family about it like way over 1 year later, because it's a whole longer story, but things kept changing and unfolding. And now my brother is vegan. He was eating meat at that time. My mom is now almost vegan. She's vegetarian. And my family as a whole eats a lot less meat. Like my dad, who would traditionally have been like the poster child for slaughtering cows and eating them, like he now very rarely eats beef. And like we eat, you know, meat substitutes if it's like a family hamburger day, for example. And I never directly pushed them to that. It's just something that happened, you know, as I started living that way. And then they were like, oh, like, what is that? How does that work? And they started trying. So I'll stop there. I said a lot, but that is in reference to like vegetarianism and veganism. That's kind of how this transitioned. And then the last thing I'll say is my brother, about 1.5 years after I had been vegetarian, I was staying with him, and he was like, why are you not vegan? I was like, well, you know, it just seems like it would be harder, and I just don't know if I don't want to like fail at it, you know. So he's like, you just do it, you know. And I was like, okay. And then it wasn't hard at all. I didn't miss anything at all. I didn't miss the cheese or the milk, or, you know, which also doesn't make sense really to me. Like, why? It seems like I would, but I didn't, and it's been great. So anyway, I'll stop there for a second.
Well, I want to know why did your brother go vegan?
My brother has had a lot of anxiety, and he originally found that removing gluten from his diet was very helpful in reducing his anxiety. And he is a morning radio show host. He's been in a few cities around the country for like top 40 radio stations, that type of thing. And so he would do a lot of work promoting animal welfare when he was, well, he still is, you know, doing morning radio shows. So he would do a lot of like working with the local shelters to like, you know, promote animals to find homes. So he definitely, I would say, as a strong identifier, considers himself an advocate for animals, an animal lover. And I think after I just sort of told my family, I'm like, I'm just vegetarian, I think without me saying anything, I never had to say anything. He was like, yeah, I need to stop eating animals. Like, how am I, like, I'm like defending them, I'm promoting them, and I'm also eating them. So he came to that realization on his own. But I think that, like, just me making it seem so easy and not a big deal at all, I think multiple people around me were like, oh, they're like, do you miss this? I'm like, no. I'm like, and they're like, is this hard? I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, well, maybe I should just try it. There are just more people around me who are like, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, so I think with him, it was, he already had that realization. And then I was like, yeah, this has not been hard at all. And then he jumped on the train.
Well, that's good to hear. Everyone needs to jump on the train at their own pace, whenever they're ready. I won't push them on the train. So, so tell me about, I don't even know how to, when you were in that experience, I mean, what about your senses? Like, I don't even know how you would describe it, because you just described it, but I'm wondering, like, warm or light or anything, colors, any of that? Is that
Yeah,
even
so
applicable?
it's never really stopped is the answer. And so what I can tell you is, so I had that experience, and then every morning thereafter, I would wake up automatically there was no aspiration to do anything. I wasn't reading anything that told me do this thing, you'll be a better person, none of that. Every morning on the dot, exactly like 3:30 a.m., boom, like wide awake. The way I described that period right after that experience was like the meditation was happening to me. Like, I was not meditating. It was almost like if I told you you're not going to pee all day, you have to hold it in. Eventually be like, it has to happen. It's nature. Like, that's kind of how it was with the meditation. It was like, this meditation is going to happen through you, and you can either sit here and do it, or you can fight it. But this experience of this energy it's gonna come through you. And so every morning, I was in the beginning kind of against my will, whatever that was left at that time. I'd be sitting there in meditation. In the beginning, it would be like 1 to 2.5, 3 hours. Sometimes my body was completely hurting and sore. If you don't sit at all, and even if you just sit 30 minutes, it takes a long time for your ligaments and your muscles and your body just to like recalibrate to that. And I was doing these long sits, and it was kind of what was happening then at the time was the way I perceived it was there was this physical and metaphysical transformation that was happening. So there was like things I could feel in my body, shifts and change, energy. And so the way I had a relationship with it, was like, okay, when I'm sitting in this field of energy that's opened up, there's things that are changing within me and around me that I don't know what's going on. It took me probably like 2 weeks of like reading extensively and just being on YouTube and whatever to be like, okay, without a doubt, this is a spiritual awakening. I don't know what that is, but now this must be it, because everything I'm listening to, everything I'm reading, it's an uncanny, accurate description. All these things have different flavors, but the trajectory, is similar. And so I'm like, okay. I kind of felt good, and I kind of felt scared, because it was like I could identify with what was going on. I didn't feel like I was going crazy. The first couple of days I was like, I might, no. And then I was like, no, this is like, it's repeated. This is leading to something good is happening here, but I don't know what it is. And the thing that was scariest was the pace of it. There was nothing slow about it. So it wasn't like, like a lot of times the people are on a journey, that it's their pace, it's their course, it's my journey, I'm going to do this thing. So it was like, it happened in reverse. It was like, all the things that you would have done, we're just going to erase all your preferences, reset them. And now you've got to discover how they've been reset. And the way that you do that is you go back into all the same situations that you were in. And your body is going to be so attuned. Your somatic wisdom is going to be so sensitive and so attuned that when it's out of line, you're not going to be able to pretend anymore. You're not going to be able to lie to yourself. You're not going to be able to lie to other people. You're not going to be able to play that game, which is what most people do. It's like most successful careers are built off of playing a character that people enjoy for a purpose that they need for their own benefit. And that's certainly what my career has been based off of monetarily, getting acknowledged in different ways. And so, like, just as one example, for my line of work, people, I wouldn't say like I went in there to tell lies, but I absolutely was going into a room with a goal or a mission. And then it was like, okay, I need to get the people in this room to be influenced in a certain way to do what we, whoever we is, need to want them to do. I realized right after this experience, I'm like, I can't do that anymore. Even though I'm not going in there and like lying to them and saying A is B and it's actually not, it's C. Even the little nuance where you like, it's like fake relationships. Like, that you don't want to spend any time with this person. You don't like them at all, but you need them to feel like you do because you're part of this team for business, and that's how it's done. And suddenly it was not possible. Like the pain in my body and the acuity of it and the intensity of it was so clear and so crisp and so intense that it wasn't an option. I just couldn't do it, which sounds great in a way, but also I didn't know the new things that were going to come in. All I knew was like all the game that I knew before and all the ways I knew how to interact before, that just wasn't going to be possible. And so when I say like the velocity was intense, like that's what I mean. It was like I went from, I kind of have followed this path and pattern for, like 15 plus year, 20 years working in the world in a way, and here's all the pieces and here's how they work. And then suddenly it was like, okay, I've got to feel my way into this conversation and this interaction. And now there's this whole new set of sensors that were probably there the whole time, but they were turned off. And now they're turned on and they're giving me all new sets of information that I can't ignore. So learning that was scary.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Turning, everything off and now everything on. And now you're in really alignment with that, with your heart. And and that's amazing. And so tell me about, so then you didn't have any really friends you could turn to.
No.
So what did you do? How did you navigate?
Yeah, I had started a nonprofit called belong.lgbt, and that was peer coaching in the LGBT community. and that was good because we had like 100, this is like free, come get training to be a coach to help other people. And through that, I met a vast variety of people. And one of the people in that group was like someone who I refer to as like overtly spiritual. They were like talking about it a lot and like, I'm doing these things and I go to this group. And so he was the first person that I ever approached, other than like a couple of very close friends. But the first person that I approached that I knew was like somehow tied to some spiritual communities and stuff. And I just told him like, I don't know, like this is what's happening. I'm waking up every morning at 3. These meditations are happening. I'm feeling all these things I've never felt before. I'm having these experiences. And he was just like, oh yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I'm like, so what? So he's like, oh, you should come to my group, And I was like, oh, okay. So the group was, it's called the Oneness Blessing. And it actually couldn't have been better for me because it's basically a group where you go and you do this meditation together, and it's based out of India, and you place your hands once you're in this meditation, this group meditation. Then you get up one by one and you place your hands on the top of other people's heads. You sort of exchange this like loving kindness energy that flows through your body. And it was so great for me because it wasn't about words. There was no teachings. And this energy that I was perceiving, that was me, bigger than me, but also part of me, I could give and receive that with this group of people. And so it felt really, it's like, oh, okay. I still don't know what's going on, but like these people know that there's something other than just our normal 3-dimensional existence, and there was no like dogma behind it, which was really great. It was just like an energetic thing. And so that helped me a lot to kind of just be like, okay, I'm not the only one that realizes there's some other facets to this whole experience. So that's how, and then, it's like, once you meet a group, you meet some other people, you kind of go through some things. So that's how it started for my first kind of like spiritual group, I would say. And then later, much later in that year, I basically took the year off after that experience from my company. I was trying to shut down that company, Cloud Tags. And so I took a year and just had to kind of travel because I was relearning so many things. I spent time with my brother in Encinitas on the West Coast, which is where Yogananda started his community. So I got to spend a lot of time out there. Some beautiful, beautiful people, lots of different journeys. And then I was in Africa and India. I just took a month in India to travel by myself without an itinerary and without a companion, just to kind of see what would transpire. And ultimately, it led me to Ram Dass, which is where my name comes from. Crazy turn of events that led me to him. But that year in Maui, I got to spend time with him in person there. And then I would tell you I found my spiritual home. And the way I explain it to people is like, once you, different from religion, nothing wrong with religion, but different from religion, when you're on a spiritual journey, when you have a spiritual awakening, everything is possible because it's not tied to dogma. So like your life is your sadhana, your spiritual practice. Like whatever is happening and unfolding, it's like, it's perfect for you. You start to see that and realize it. So, you know, when you first start out on this, because it's not dogmatic and it's not like this is right and this is wrong, you must sing this song and read this book, because it's not that, the sea is insanely vast because everything's possible. Everything's kind of up for grabs. And so until you kind of find your spiritual home, it can be pretty scary and pretty daunting because, again, there's so much possibility and you're trying like, who am I and what is this and what are my practices? And so eventually when I found Ram Dass and he connected me, introduced me to Neem Karoli Baba, which was his teacher, I was like, I knew in my body without a doubt, like, this is my spiritual home. This is my lineage to help direct my own autonomous sovereign life. So, yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, your journey and what you said about, I guess, the non-attachment to dogma opens up to expansiveness. And I get it. I see what you're saying. I mean, that's just, it's, I don't want to say, I mean, so, I mean, I don't want to, I'm not saying anything against religion, you know, I'm saying that opening up to something that's just open. And I think that really ties into what I've been thinking about lately, is nature being that expansiveness. When you're really tied into who you are as a child of this planet, of this Mother Earth, right? I mean, instead of like, as in this industrial age, the whole mindset there is totally different. But when you're connected to nature and that the tree is flowing through your body, the air is flowing through your body at all times, I mean, it's a whole different thing. And that is unlimited potential.
Yeah. And so that's a good segue. I mean, that's kind of bring it full circle after meeting Ram Dass and Neem Karoli Baba, and just that energy field open up. It's still here now. If I close my eyes, that's my meditation every day. I'm sitting in this energy field, which I would now refer to as unconditional love. And so ever since I've been doing that and surrendering to the truth of that energy and where it's directing me, that's what led me to Just Love Forest. And as I've said before, like I was doing over time, I started doing a number of different practices, and those practices all had the message of get a forest for healing, get a forest for healing, get a forest for healing. And as I've said to you, like now people would look be like, oh, you got a forest for healing. But that at that time seemed very foreign and very far away and very unreachable, like we all might feel if someone said get a forest for healing. And so to your point, I mean, I find, you know, it's difficult for me after about 10 days not to be in a nature setting to reset with that expansiveness, like not as an idea, but just as a direct experience, to be in that like unfettered, untainted, free, open, expansive space. Super, super important for me to just be as grounded and centered and helpful as I can be.
Yeah, and I know what you mean. Definitely, when I'm not getting out there enough, like it's been raining, 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 and I could just feel the energy in me, and it's not peaceful. So I did get out yesterday for a couple of hours, which is good. I had to force myself up off the couch to get out, and once I was back in the element of, I feel like, of my being, and that my being as a child of nature, and the element of that, and being grounded and connected, and breathing, and away from all the chaos of my mind and the chaos of the internet and everything calling to me, the phone, everybody, the messages coming in everywhere. It really was such a beautiful sense of peace. And you're so right. And some people have never really experienced that.
Yeah, I found that to be true. And I didn't realize how, going back to what we talked about earlier, I was in nature a lot as a kid, but then once I got into college, I wasn't, I mean, I might go hiking once a year, twice a year, because friends were going, but it wasn't part of my life. And yeah, it's turned out to be the greatest thing now, just to know that and find it and have such a deep relationship with it and see the transformative power that other people can experience with it, just by sharing and providing, that space, not having to do anything other than just be in that space.
That's true. You're right. Just be there, and then let it come to you, like you were saying.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think the more connected we are with nature, so I feel like that a lot of times I'm really working on people to be recycling and to be vegan and everything. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, I'm doing this wrong. That they've forgotten them. They don't have that connection with Mother Earth, right? It's like I missed the step here.
Mm.
The step is connecting with Mother Earth and all of her living beings. Then there'll be a reason to recycle, and a reason to be vegan, and a reason to eat whole food, plant-based, right? Instead of this narrative of, I mean, these foods that aren't even real, right? And that's, again, disconnection from nature and Mother Earth. She's given us all these beautiful living foods. So when we do connect with her, and we can just be in gratitude for her gifts, and acknowledge her gifts of these healthy living foods, we want them, and then we're in alignment with that, and it's so different. And that's, again, so the foundation is really, I feel like, connecting to Mother Earth and listening, or not even listening, because if you're really connected with a Mother Earth, you're going to understand what is the best for your being, and it's going to be natural. You're going to become more aware, and this might sound all hokey, but I think, the more you become aware, you might start connecting, and awareness grows, and she will show you the way, and it will be intuitive.
It's kind of going back to that, like that somatic intelligence. It's kind of like you have one group of people who will do what you tell them to do to, quote unquote, save the earth. And they're doing it from a fear-based perspective. If I don't do these things, like, I want my life to keep being the way that it is, in a capitalist, greed-based, destructive way. And they've told me that to preserve that, well, I got to change my light bulbs. That's one way to do it. It's fear-based, but it's still just kind of perpetuating the same model. The other way is self-realization, like, I am nature, right? Not because someone gave me a book, not because I went to a seminar and someone told me I'm nature, because that won't work. But in spending time in those environments, there's a natural process that can unfold as a remembering. It's like, oh, right, like, I'm not just here to take and to abscond, for my own benefit and my own story. I'm actually, like, part of this. And then it's like my friend Tom Booth will say, like, really what Earth's going through is an autoimmune disease. Like, nature, like, we are nature, and we are actually killing and attacking ourselves. So it's not like we're destroying the earth. It's like we're destroying ourselves, and we are nature. And in that case, it's an autoimmunity. And so it's like, to break that, It has to be the remembering of what you really are, what you truly are, what you really are. And then once you have that realization, you don't really have to try. No one has to really encourage you too much, like, because you are it. You remember, and you're like, oh, right, I don't want to treat myself like shit. And that's when the self-love starts to come back in. That's when the compassion starts to come back in. That's when the empathy starts to come back in. So I agree with you. I mean, I think it's not bad to do it the other way, per se, in terms of like fear-based, yada, yada. It's just like for it to be lasting transformation instead of just perpetuating a little longer the same stuff just to get by a little longer with the same stuff. It's the transformation that I think what we're all really longing for, through that remembrance.
Yeah, exactly. Because then there's a sense of purpose and passion behind it.
And, again, a lot of this stuff stems from the lack of self-love. When you have that realization that you are that, it gives you the opportunity to start to allow love to be a palpable experience, not an idea, not a card you buy, not, and so love can become a tangible, palpable energy that can just direct the totality of your life. But for that to become real for you, there has to be that moment of realization that you're all of this in some form or fashion. There can be a million different flavors of that. There's not a single way to do that, but there's got to be that moment of like that opening to realize, I'm not just the cog in the wheel with a name and a car and a mortgage, and I just got to scurry around. There's got to be a moment of like, there's more here. Whatever that means. And again, it could be an infinite number of flavors, but there's got to be something, is that opening.
Right. And tell us about Just Love Forest in case people want to experience this.
Yeah. So it's it's a very open blank canvas for everyone's path and experience to help you have that realization on your own, which is our tagline is, remember you are nature. And so we do forest therapy. I'm a certified forest therapy guide now, which I love the practice of Shinrin-yoku. I'm a trained meditation teacher from Jack Kornfield and Tara Brock's 2-year program. So we do meditation retreats. But also, I mean, it's built up a beautiful, wonderful community of all sorts of amazing beings, you being one of them, who come out and they find each other there. And so a lot of the programs, everything that we do is co-created with people that have found the forest and I've met. I'm not like building programs. I'm not doing the old games. I'm not like searching for people on the internet to come to. It's like it's all been this growing natural family of people who are symbiotic, and we're all deepening our gifts and offering them to people through the forest. So all different kinds of retreats, healthy spiritual retreats of varying natures. We have a couple of big events in the spring and the fall, like the Steward's Carnival, which is kind of a cornucopia of everything, like a bigger festival. So it's all of those things. But the underlying premise is that you're there not because someone's telling you. There's not a course, there's not a book. You're there experientially to have the time and spaciousness and the environment to realize that you are nature. Not you like it, not you're protecting it, not you're on a mission to save it. No, you are it.
Right.
So it's a little bit of a different relationship once you get to that place. And that's the hope, is without forcing. Maybe just, we just have enough of a forest that with enough love, just let the forest do its job, let loves do its job. And like I'm just referred to myself as head steward. So I'm going to work for the forest to keep it clean and safe and, harmonious and healthy. And the rest of the stuff just kind of happens.
Right. And this is in Rome, Georgia, if anybody's watching us.
Yeah, we say Poetry, Georgia, which is there's a whole story. I won't talk on this podcast, but it's a ghost town there, Poetry, Georgia, that has a whole lineage of practices related to what we're doing now. So we still say in Poetry, Georgia, but for the official map, Rome, Georgia gives you a good sense directionally where it is.
Great. Yes. And what if somebody's watching and they have no idea where to start? What would you say to them if they don't live close to here, to Georgia?
To start with veganism or a spiritual journey or just love forest?
Well, how about, I think let's do the spiritual journey. Like they want to move away from the chaos. What would you tell them?
I would tell them that you got to start to get to a place of I don't know. That would be the first thing. Is like everything in your life you've been taught that the way that you're going to do it and achieve it and figure it out is you're going to know. And so to know, you're going to do a list of things that people tell you to do. And that's what, the more you know, the safer you are, all these things, right? You have to start to get into an open-mindedness and a playfulness that like you don't actually know. Like when you start to really dig into what you actually know from your direct experience and your senses and your heart versus what you're reading and what you're being told. So I think a good place to start is to get into the excitement. I always tell people there's a big difference between I don't know and I don't know. So like getting to that second part of the excitement of you actually don't know, and it's not demeaning and it's not scary. It's actually really exciting. That's the entry point to them being like, okay, what is happening here? And so I would say after that, like good places of call are not standard. So once you get to the place that you don't know and you're excited about that not knowing and where it can lead you, which we'd also eventually refer to as surrender, then you can just to observe what's already in your life and what's coming into your life and how that's going to start to affect your journey. As soon as there's an invitation in your heart and openness and a curiosity that's heart-centered, then you start to see and listen to things that you just were kind of not paying attention to. You're down here typing on your computer all day, and all of a sudden you're like, what's actually happening here? And as you start to observe and you notice and you get a little quieter, suddenly someone will send you a text message, or suddenly like a book will come into your life, or suddenly you'll get an invitation to a crazy place called Just Love Forest. Let that happen naturally. Like this is not going to be become a spiritual journey person by getting your master's in spirituality. So have an open curiosity and begin to trust yourself, and then just start to get really quiet and listen and look and see what's already unfolding, that's already always been unfolding, that you just haven't been playing with in that way. That's what I would say.
Yeah, well, I love that. When I was up there having the experience at Just Love Forest with the rock, I thought I've walked by rocks so many times, right? But never had an experience like this. And then it came up this week about is a rock a living organism? Is a rock alive? And that's the journey, right? All this I don't know, I don't know what, okay, what did I learn from this being that's sitting here so quietly and weathering all the storms? And what can I learn from this rock? And what can I learn from this tree and the other tree supporting, and just this vastness, by allowing that into my soul, allowing the clutter, just setting the clutter aside and opening up to the feeling of it.
And the second thing I'll say lastly is just as you start to go through that, it's a very simple exercise, but it's incredibly powerful. And tell people when they're like trying to make a decision and they're like, I don't know, is this real? Is what I'm supposed to be doing? It's like, just pause and just take a slightly deeper breath and just put your hand on your heart, place your hand on your heart and say, I am meant to be doing blah, blah, blah. I am not meant to be doing blah, blah, blah. If you are actually open and curious and quiet, I promise you will feel a difference within yourself when you say both of those things that are contradictory in terms of what you should be doing and what could happen next. And whatever your body, your somatic intelligence tells you, then only do that. Like you can play as long as you want to, you can torture yourself, but like I would suggest just do that. Just follow your heart. So that's all I got for you.
Well, I love it. This is I feel like I've had a spiritual experience. Well, this is all a spiritual experience. Everything is spiritual.
Yeah. We're just noticing it.
Right. That's funny. Well, I want to say thank you to everybody who's been watching. I'm not sure. James was here. He says, hello, good peeps. And Shovit was saying, yes, nowadays people are doing digital marketing. Now we're rewinding a little bit. And JJ, she's one of my good friends, and I've been telling her about you. She said she felt like she had a very similar experience, not as quite as profound. So I'm going to have to ask her about that later. Yes, when she watched no, she watched, I think, a raw documentary. And so the raw diet really has made a change in her life. And that's the natural living foods of our beautiful planet. So, of course, it makes a difference in the energy level. So she's so excited, and she's gotten so much energy from the fruit. Sometimes I'm thinking, what are you on? The fruit of life, right? The energy of life. So it's beautiful, and we really connect to these gifts that are right here in front of our face, that, like you're saying, that we might not have seen this whole time. So thank you so much, Bala, and thanks everybody for watching. This has been wonderful. I'm very honored. You're going to have to come back, and then you can tell us more stories about. Maybe we'll get into the Poetry Georgia story.
Yeah, absolutely. We can talk more about the real story of the forest one day.
Yeah, this is just chapter 1.
Just chapter 1. Forever unfolding.
All right. Yes, it will unfold. All right, y'all. Well, thank you so much. Namaste, vegan, everyone.
Namaste. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Soon. Bye. Thank you.